Welcome back to another episode of Talk with the CEO. I'm Darius, your host for today's conversation, and as always, I'm joined by my fantastic co-host, Queen Esther, Enikeme, and Abraham. Today, we have an exceptional topic lined up for you as we explore the history of one of IHF's most impactful center, the Kenya Center. Last week, we took you on a journey through the incredible story of our Thailand Center, sharing how it began with a powerful vision of education and transformation in a community facing immense challenges. If you haven't listened to that episode yet, check it out to understand how it all started. But today, we're shifting our focus to Kenya, a country with a unique set of hurdles and triumphs, and a place where the IHF mission has truly flourished.
Woke up today, the sun is shining.
The Kenyan Center has such an inspiring story. It started in a similar way to the Thailand Center, but with Carol Sasaki leading the charge. But the challenges here were different. And the transformation it has brought to the community is something really, really special.
Absolutely, Queen Esther. From the remote areas where education seems like a distant dream to where being a place of hope and opportunity, the Kenyan Center has become a beacon of opportunity for so many children and their family.
And let's not forget the personal stories of resilience and growth that has emerged from there. The Kenyan Center isn't just a building, it's a symbol of what can be achieved when people come together with a shared vision to create lasting change.
Let's seize the light, let joy surround. In every moment, love is found.
Exactly, guys. So we'll dive into all that and more today. So stay tuned as we explore how the IHF Kenya Center came to be and the impact it continues to have. Let's get started. Welcome, Ma. We have our CEO here as always. We are so pleased to have you here with us. Thank you for gracing us with your presence. We are going to start with a question from the beginning, with you sharing what inspired you to establish the IHF Kenya Center, and I'm sure that there were some bit of challenges in those, especially in those early days. So how were you able to overcome them?
Wow, excellent question, sweet love, and worded so well. It's kind of like with Thailand, where I had to start discussing sexual slavery and how that grabbed me first in Thailand. And then we went on to describing the history of the Thailand Center. We may have to do the same thing here because there's just been so many years since 1994 that and so much that's happened that is integral to why we are what we are as we are today. And I think there's so much to learn from it. So let me start with my daughter and I arriving in Kenya. And we had done some work in Asian islands, remote Asian islands. And one of those people had a vacation home in Kenya and was born and raised there, still had relatives there, and also had a vacation home there, and gave us a treat as a thank you on our last day and said, I've set you up at the Hilton. This is before the Hilton became real seedy. Though even there were interesting things going on there, let me tell you. But gave us the treat of going from working, living very, very primitive to being able to have a rest time. And being my daughter was only 5 years old, it was, she really wanted that. A swimming pool, and was so happy. And that's where we went. So we arrived there and woke up in the morning, and my daughter could swim in the swimming pool. And it was just, oh my gosh, so wonderful. And such a difference from where she had been going from place to place, much more nomadic or isolated with me. So she was thrilled. She got to see Western TV there on the TV station, and she hadn't seen TV in a long time. And we were going back from the pool down that hall, and my daughter tugged on me, and I was dealing with folks on the BlackBerry. In those days, we had BlackBerries in the 90s, dealing with some problems left over in Indonesia. And she was tugging and tugging on me. And so I had to stop. And that was just irritating of her and rude of her. And what is it? And I stopped. And she, shh, look. And around the corner was this gal, one of the housekeepers, on the floor, sitting on the floor with her head between her knees and her shoulders shaking, obviously crying. So we went up and we sat. Her name was also Carol. And we sat with her. And she told us what was going on, that they had just learned more about AIDS. It wasn't like in the 80s in Thailand. Now we knew what AIDS was, and her husband was dealing with family and death and having lost someone, and she didn't know how to handle the problem in the slum there in Kenya, and how fast it was growing and spreading, and trying to talk through sobs and crying of the patriarchal system, making it very difficult because they don't want to use condoms and blah, blah, blah. And her idea that if she could do movies for people and they would be able to come and watch movies. This is before you had movies online. And we charge for that, or they don't have to pay if they are sitting in a class first teaching about AIDS. And the problem with those that are nursing who have AIDS and don't realize what that's doing to the baby was already a huge project of mine in Thailand, and something near and dear to me. I loved her idea. So we said we would meet her for breakfast and treat her at breakfast. And she said, oh, no, I'm not allowed to eat here. And my daughter found that so strange, that because they're a housekeeper, they're not allowed to eat in a place. She just found that very, very strange. When we woke up in the morning to go and meet and eat with her elsewhere, the Popeyes that was nearby, meet with her elsewhere, my daughter said, Mom, I have an idea. And remember how young she was. She's my flower. I have the best birth children in the world. And she said, Mom, why can't we just ask if we can get a refund, even though this was a gift? Can we cancel and get a refund for just stay here a few more days and then get a refund for the next week and not go on that safari and use that money to do the project? And I said, well, we'd have to find someplace safe to stay, honey. And so let me think about it. And then when we were with Carol, my name, Carol said, oh my gosh, that would be amazing. I would love for you to stay with me. And so that was the birth of IHF in Kenya, when I had sworn to everyone, no more IHF centers. But then there was someone so sincere. It's like my telling the Nigerian that, okay, we'll start a center there and try to fund it. It's hard when you have such sincere people. So that was the start, when there was no way. It was supposed to be, my daughter was having a treat before we went to work on the Eastern Europe sexual slavery issue there. She was to have a treat of a safari in Kenya. And instead, that ended up becoming IHF. And the way it got to IHF is living at her place. We had people yelling at us, really angry that we were there, and made sense. And what are you coming to just look at us and mooch us, hey, and upset and angry. And she was scared for our safety. And my daughter wasn't a bit, because she had been in slums all over the world and very comfortable, but the adults were. And that led to the burning of trash from the cruise ships and hospitals in the US and elsewhere, that we were breathing the burning trash hump there, to deciding I've got to get in touch with the people I know, that we do something about this, and that the world at least knows about it. So I contacted some of my folks in media. This was closer to my days when I used to be involved with that, and contacted them so that they did stories, and that issue got going. I didn't want to actually start a project on that issue, since my focus was on children and education and adults in the community being educated. So we did more educational classes on it, and we ended up doing the safari, just a lesser one, not quite so super elegant, and doing that safari. And the safari driver was driving the van, this old sweet guy, driving the van, but getting very little because he couldn't afford his own van, and being paid very little. So my daughter decided she wanted to write to her friends and surprise him with buying him a van. And he was so bowled over by having the van and the cost of his license paid for, that he then wanted to volunteer and help in any work we might do in the future there. So that kind of bothered me, that I have people who want to do something and help and are offering to, and I'm just saying no, no, no. So that was kind of building up the dun pulse of no, 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 no more centers, no, no, no. And became kind of a side project while I was doing our other projects. Carol ended up contacting me, wanting me to meet this gentleman with a safari company who had heard about how I had this other guy who now, through his business, had 3 vans because of the money he made off that one van, and that story he had heard and met with that guy, and he wanted to know if he funded it and it didn't take away from our funds for the other centers, would we help with the many, many orphans that are in his village. And I didn't like the idea of having someone fund something totally that was under IHF. So I said, we'll do a little experiment, and I will meet with and talk with the kids, and then we'll take it from there. At the same time we did that, then we had, from Carol's slum, from having stayed there for a couple of weeks, we had started teaching classes and having kind of a free babysitting, which for kids my daughter's age on down, younger, and collecting the grandmas who are my absolute mainstay everywhere I go in the world, collecting the grandmas and others, and starting a school program there. And during that period, they were flooded out and didn't have proper piping. So we had to make use of our contacts in the US to try to fix the proper piping. And we were there began a project there that was a very subtle, quiet IHF project. I did not want it big. I just wanted it continuing with the grandmothers, parents, etc. Quietly, Kabete doing this. I didn't put it yet into the newsletters or anything because I wanted to go slow and try it out. It's a good thing I did that, because as we progressed, as always happens in nonprofits and is a lesson, you have people coming in, all different kinds of con artists, and it even ends up that this Carol was doing some cons and actually charging some of the people who were supposed to be going to classes free and using money inappropriately that was being sent for the classes, and using it personally, as often happens everywhere. So it wasn't a big surprise to me. I've known it all over the world for many years before doing Kenya, but it was disappointing. In the meantime, children have vanished, And I was very concerned about the children who had vanished. And that van driver with the safari thing had me meet with the head of notary for Kenya, who was also the head of water for Kenya, and just an amazing human being. And he talked about the huge need that children are trafficked even within Kenya as servants and to different families, or have to work free when their adults work for family, and what goes on sexually, and was discussing all this with me, and was saying, please start a children's center. So I went ahead and told this Najaga James of Planet Safari, a horrible human being, I went ahead and told him that I would start one of our children's centers, but we wanted to do it slowly. And we met with, before choosing the property in Sabukia, we met with the head of the NGOs and met with everyone I should meet with, as I know from years of doing this, only to find out, I had people coming, volunteering from around the world, wonderful people, only to find out from the volunteers when I was not there that Najaga James was bringing prostitutes there nights, and his wife was so what? That's none of your business, to the orphanage, that they were doing corrupt projects with the police, and there was this fake robbery that ended up, we found all the stuff at the place, and just constant problems, constant cons, dealing with corrupt police who would say, we will make this place safe, make a robbery, and we will do this, but of course we have to be paid overtime, and then happen again, and all the cons that go on all over the world and you're used to, but just absolutely amplified there. There were some children that obviously you ask them certain questions, and this is worldwide. You ask them in their different dialects and languages, things like, have they ever had ice cream cones? And you ask them questions where you know whether they really are in need or not. And I had done a series of different talks and sleeping with and staying there for months on end, back and forth, just realizing some were not in need at all and others were horribly in need. There came a point, I'm bypassing a lot, but there came a point where the children that were dying out in East Central Pokot, someone who worked for the UN, who's a friend of mine, said, I can't get them covered. And because of the politics of the mouth of the Sudan there, and I can't get them helped. And the Turkana, Samburu, who I love, tribes I adore, are fighting with them. They've been given weapons to give access to the UN, and now they're taking the women, raping them, and the goats. They all take it from each other because it's survival, just like any of us would if we were trying to survive. And they've got to get help. So we went out there, and this person helped, and a person named Muhia Mena, and Najaga James, owner of Planet Safari, who then ran to be mayor of Nairobi. Just the corruption, oh my God. I've had it all over the world. I deal with cartels, but I'll tell you, this was just never ending corruption, side by side with incredible angels and grandmothers and mothers and students, the two extremes side by side constantly. And so I went out, did the famine feed. When we were going out to Pokot, East Central Pokot, I had worked with other nomadic tribes. I don't know what it is, but I felt this overwhelming feeling of, this is my future, and no matter how much I want to just run from this country and all the corruption and theft and robbery and threats to me physically, and I was beaten at one point, this is calling me. This is something. And then when we got there, and there were so many, I can recognize instantly stages of starvation, and I was overwhelmed by the how can it be this bad and not be getting help? What in the world? And the amount of threats from other folks in Kenya, Kenyans. And Kenyans have been a part of my life, all my life, because my father used to head, my birth father, not stepfather, used to head the YMCAs, and we had huge programs in Kenya. And so Kenya has been a part of my life, even before I went to Kenya. So it was hurtful to keep experiencing what I was experiencing. But when we were driving out to Pokot, even before just driving there, was that overwhelming sense of driving into my future and into something calling me. And it just surrounded the air I was breathing. We arrived there, and I got out to the lines and lines and lines for the famine feed. We did not have enough food. And people coming over in a distance, the large sand dune mountains, so many coming from a distance, and how far they had walked just to get a cabbage and a small bag of rice. And going around and realizing the state of everyone, the skin so paper thin that it just was broken everywhere on all of them. The eye problems from it, the hair, just everything. That I just thought, all right, this is the last thing on earth that I can start doing. I cannot handle everyone, the street children and the welfare mothers in the US and IHF. It's irresponsible of me to do anything here. But the feeling was overwhelming. So all that back and forth about, no, I don't want to start IHF, we'll do small little quiet projects, all the stuff going on was washed ashore when I got out and saw them. I can't explain the feeling. I just knew this is something, and I made a promise to myself that I cannot turn away from this. Cannot. And that was the start of IHF. It was not the end of the corruption. I ended up actually horrific things happening to me that I won't go into detail on, but certainly will always be impacted by. We've had children that have died in my arms. One child that haunts me, the most precious little girl that we were teaching classes to, and she attended every class, which classes under the trees. The money we put into building the structures ended up being misused, and government officials out there corrupt and misusing. And so we would just teach under trees. All that matters in the end isn't the money. It's just the teaching and sharing and loving while we're trying to somehow get them fed and build up their strength. That young little girl, precious darling. I will never not see her face. She got sick with the flu, and I had to get on the plane and could not make it in time if we didn't keep going. And so her grandmother offered to walk her the long ways, and the uncle to get her to the hospital. The clinic was just too far, which is why I begged the children, I need someone to become a doctor. And Nelson said, I will become a doctor, Mom. If you can educate me and get me that degree, I will become a doctor. Dan paid for his education. He went overseas for it, and he kept his promise and started a clinic out there that's closer for them. Because as we're driving, we pass her on the ground, and the grandmother crying, and she died from diarrhea. Simplest things they die from, such lack of basics. And there's just story after story after story I won't go into, but it soon, within the first year of working with them, became very obvious that it wasn't a fairy tale story. Wherever you have removed populations who have been abused, they have had to learn to do cons in order to survive. They have to. And so you have to set a different priority of ethics in terms of survival, and you just don't care about certain things. You just want them to have those skills. Though that led to our starting the schools and the famine feeds out in Pakat, and the children were not getting better. Their skin was not getting thicker. The children in Sabukia and the guy who owns Sabukia, much property there, this Najagana James, he went out to Pakat and he wanted to eat goat, and did roasted goat, and ate on a platform the goat, and just sat there, and everyone had to sit in the hot sun and watch him eat goat rather than to be served goat or any food. And just so many things like that, just dove experience after experience, made the conviction that I cannot forsake my promise. And I found myself promising the grandmothers, of course, most of all the grandmothers and the older grandfathers, promising that I don't know what I can do. I have too many projects now. I'm a doctoral student. I'm also trying to do stuff. I'm consulting with government. I didn't tell them the White House at that point. And I don't have more money. I'm out of money. But I will try to get what little I can. If you promise me that I don't have to get it for your labor, you will do. If I teach you how to teach, you will teach. If I bring the water, you're not going to use that so that the rich get wealthy off the water and make the poor pay for the water like I've experienced elsewhere. If we gather as babysitters and women to strengthen so that the children have somebody taking care of them and conglomerate, just like you do within your nomadic tribes. If we do that at the center in the same way as I see you doing, that's so beautiful, then yes, I will do it. But I can't do it if I have to pay more directors and more staff. I can't. So that was the initial message that went going out. That got to the head of the NGOs and to this Najagana James, and they were furious, saying, no, our people will be the directors, and our people will have to oversee this, and our people will be the bosses, and blah, blah. Thank God we were not dependent, and I had not accepted his money. Thank God that part of me in IHF, that is a lesson for everyone, wanted to make sure from the very beginning of IHF, just as in my other projects, that we're not dependent on any one source for income. Thank goodness, or we would not have survived. So it ended up that the NGO head, who ended up thankfully being barred from the UK, from the US, from all over the world because of his dishonesty, but he put IHF into his name and Najaga James' name, trying to lay claim to the property. And even within the court system, I never got the money back. I never got all the computers, the stove, the property, never back. Even within the court system, they had documents stolen from the judge's chamber. And the judge claimed, no one can steal it. I'm the only one with the lock and the security on it. Still, he said, I don't know how it happened, but it's gone. Little did he know that I have been through working with cartels. So what I told him was my last evidence I had copies of. And actually, I didn't tell him it was the last evidence. I said, please don't lose this. We cannot lose this. So I did have copies. Everyone was in shock when I had the copies and wanted to continue with the court case of they've stolen all this. And they not only stolen it, but they dropped off these orphans, not the wealthier ones that were under them, the truly impoverished children they've dropped off all over Kenya, as far as Mombasa. And I've been spending thousands and hours trying to find them and find homes for them. And I want the public to know. They stopped the court case. Even the lawyer involved representing us would hide out, and they stopped the court case. Why? Because you had the head of NGOs involved. You had the police involved. Nobody wanted to get them angry at them and put their family in danger. I could just fly away. So who do you call bad? Everybody. If you look at their situation, their actions make sense for what they've experienced. At one point, I had to just give up. And that was at a point where some horrific things happened to me and to some volunteers from Indonesia I had brought and US. And we decided at that point we would just give up, but not give up on the Pecat. We will stand up to the Pecat. And we had some people, thankfully, I had some people high up, at White House level and government to intervene. And that at that point then, we looked at how do we move these children who for over a year we've been trying to feed and send food to and cannot live day and night without destroying the rest of IHF, lived way out in Pecat in order to make sure they're being fed. There is a thing that exists not just in Kenya, it exists all over the world, where the poor often will keep the even poorer and starving even poorer, and they become like the servants to the poor, and they're brought out to show the churches, and they're brought out to show the foreigners in order to bring in money to them and their so-called projects. A lot of corrupt churches. In fact, sadly, preachers are the number one profession all over the world in every country. It's the religious heads often that have been most involved in the trafficking of children and sexual abuse. And yet it is also the churches that helped me when I was a young runaway and that have helped so many of the sex slaves. So again, you have those two dichotomies, those two sides in extreme. We finally went and decided to buy Nakuru and got the government involved in that, the president involved. It was Moi at that point was president, got him involved, had everyone okayed. In fact, we ended up buying land that was from Moi, but we had everyone involved because I didn't want any politics backlashing onto the children. And I wanted to be making the chiefs and the people out in Pecat look good instead of have a reason to want us to fail. So, and some of them were just wonderful, beautiful human beings, and other extremely, extremely corrupt, and having to work side by side, just as in every country, everywhere, and is the nature of our lives. So finally, we bought the Nakuru Center. I'm going to stop the story here because that has a story in itself, that the individuals that made it possible and the children themselves, I have to give them their full podcast time. Just so amazing. I want to give a shout out that Danny, our director in Medan, he was dropped off with me in the middle of East Central Pecat, and then again it happened in Baringo, and told that we were going to be raped and killed, and he went through so much, having to hide from those corrupt police who were trying to steal all their compute. He went through so much in those. This was 2002 to 2004. And Danny, oh my gosh, bless his soul. Danny went from hiding, not knowing if he would live, and my having to fly out before him to hit my country to replenish supplies for Kenya. And I was there, it was Christmas, the day after Christmas, when I awoke in the middle of the night and just felt like a calling to me and the sound of children's voices, and just turned on the TV. And that's when we were told about the huge earthquake in Aceh, where we had many children. And I was on the phone with them. Danny was in hiding in Kenya from the corrupt police, here just trying to help and feed starving, and yet hiding for his life. And when I got the call that about the children, so I reached Danny's brother Faisal in Indonesia, and I said, Faisal, are they okay? Yes, Mommy, listen to them. We're okay, Mommy, we're on the street. We're singing, Mommy, we're on the street. We're okay. Building bad, but we're okay, Mom. And over the TV, they say, alert for tsunami. And I'm telling them, no, big wave is coming. Big wave, tsunami. No. That's just your TV news making big deal. No, big wave coming. You must go to mountain or you'll be washed away. Big wave, tsunami. No, that's made up TV. We're fine, Mommy, don't worry. And of course, the tsunami hit. So Danny, our precious, amazing Danny, went from being beaten, from being left in the desert in Kenya, from hiding out. He so believes in helping children, and that why are we here on earth if we're having children trafficked and starving and using our life for what? And he went from hiding to us getting him out somehow directly into Aceh, where his family comes from, Sumatra and Medan and Aceh, and spending months and months cleaning dead bodies everywhere. I mean, we couldn't walk without everywhere. Danny went through that, and here is Danny still dedicating his life to teaching and helping the children in Medan. So I hope when you, and he went through such emotional, like PTSD turmoil from, they're all scared to return to Kenya from what he went through in Kenya, even more than the tsunami. And because there's something about having a group of people coming at you, and a group of people that is different than when you're there working with groups of people to help clean up bodies and help people. It's a different mental thing that happens to one's mind. Danny is still there in Medan and helping children. So I really feel like Kenya owes him a lot, and Indonesia owes him so much, and I owe him so much. So that's all we went through to get to the point of having the center this 16 years ago. It brings us up to the point of 16 years ago, and having the center, I think it's that amount of years. I have to check dates. I don't know. Having the center and the story there is just amazing, and I have to have time to talk about those amazing people who, like Danny, give me such joy and feed me in life.
All right, thank you very much, Mike. The Kenyan story is very inspiring, and I learned a lot. And one thing I learned from your life story and how you started Kenyan journey is nothing ever is impossible. So we want to go into the impact and growth of the Kenyan Center. I've listened to your story, and I want to ask this question. What do you believe have been the biggest impact the Kenyan Center has had on the local communities, like in Nakuru?
Oh, sweet love, that has to be told through the story of the Nakuru Center. I can tell you the impact from the story I've just told you. So let me focus on that, and then we'll need to do a different podcast on the Nakuru Center, because I can't do both, and it won't make sense. And it will be, again, shallow and superficial if I answer that question without the story. And I don't want to do that. I want people to understand what's behind the lessons and growth and what we mean by deep, slow roots. So the impact and growth for Pakat, I know one of them has been getting other charities out there helping, and the UN more involved. That's been one impact. The other impact for Pakat and the children from Nairobi and the children in Sabukia that we were able to get is they've become educated. Some of them have gone on to university degrees, so they're able to support their children, their families, and more importantly, they believe in passing it on, and they've actively done that. So that impact for a removed, and there are still, please understand, oh my God, there are still so many in drastic starving need in East Central Pokot and communities like that throughout the world that are under the thumb of such corruption, not because there's only bad people, not at all. There are far more good than bad people, but because they're so removed and so isolated, many of them don't even have birth certificates, they can easily vanish and information, rumors become truth via corrupt people who are the minority but end up using and abusing them in ways. So how do you solve that? And what is the impact with those isolated, removed, nomadic and pastoral populations throughout the world? And children who are orphans in corrupt orphanages or orphanages that are taken over by corrupt people within government, as happened to me. What can we do to protect that from happening? And what has been that impact? I would like to address, not our Nakuru Center until we go into its mission and its story. The answer is, I hate saying the only answer because there's no such thing. Problems and human beings are too diverse. But for me, at my old age, it kind of feels like the only answer, even though I know that can't be true. And that is that the people who have gone through those experiences and the people living within those tribes who cannot tell the truth safely without endangering all their family, and you can't ask them to, learn practical skills to reach out beyond their boundaries so that they're allowed to keep their identity, their tribe, their ownership, their culture, without having to merge into another and serve it in order to survive. And that ability we're so blessed. That's the wonderful part of internet, along with the bad parts. The wonderful part is it's much easier now to teach them those skills and do that than it was in the 90s, 80s, 90s, and early 2000s. Teaching those skills requires a huge amount of patience, and it requires a sophisticated intelligence or understanding of how diverse intelligence is. And you cannot measure intelligence by one culture and way of thinking without acknowledging the many, many parts of the brains we don't use and intelligence that's needed for different lifestyles and our survival and happiness. If you have people who have that sophisticated understanding and leadership skills, they're my gems. They teach me so much. They're my gems. They're my teachers. And they're the ones that I love working with various nomadic tribes and people. It's why we have to keep IHF going at the same time as SAVE. IHF is those slow, deep roots. What have we achieved? We've achieved that by teaching those very children and their communities those skills. That's the impact. It is a slow, quiet, we don't need publicity. We don't need quantity. We need quality, slow, deep, and it requires a lot of patience. That's the result. The result is seen in the people, in the better education they have and the skills they have to help their community. The result is in the people learning how to reach out to other charities. So they don't need IHF. I don't need more work. And they have the skills now to reach out to other charities and how to organize and projects under them. That's the slow, deep roots, the quiet impact.
Wow, thank you so much, Grandma. Wow, I've seen that patience and intelligence are two key traits that are essential for success in this. Okay, so Grandma, there's this question. Now, with so many children and communities touched by your work, is there a particular story or individual from the IHF Kenyan Center that stands out in your memory? Perhaps maybe a moment or person that embodies the heart and soul of the impact that IHF is making?
Oh, wonderful. You have such wonderful questions. Again, I will not do Nakuru Center without first discussing Nairobi, Sabukia, and East Central Pokot as we have today. So it will need to be next podcast that we do Nakuru Center. But there are so many for Nakuru Center for next week, and for East Central Pokot, and for Sabukia, and for Nairobi. So ironically, this is going to sound weird, but Carol, even though she ended up stealing money, which in the circumstances, I understand, I get it. And I hope that's her karma, her business, God's business, world's business, whatever belief system anyone has, I don't care. That's her deal. But her pain for other people's pain, her desire to somehow help those that were dealing with AIDS and then not wanting to be touched or helped at all because they must be bad people or they wouldn't have AIDS and that bad karma. Her desire to do something, even though once there was more money flowing through, she ended up using it improperly. What a gem of a human being. What a gem. She'll have to work out what she did in terms of the theft, but her goodness way overrides it. And I just pray that the stealing part of her didn't lead her into dark places and unhappy places, because that beautiful part of her, and I tend to cut people off at a certain point where there's too much theft or dishonesty, just in terms of my energy level. But I pray and am still impacted by that younger Carol who so wanted and ended up helping so many children in Nairobi because of that desire. So I would like to use Carol, since we've talked about Carol. Also, I can't say the same in terms of Najaga James and Muhia Maynor, because what they did, I don't understand how they're not in jail. I cannot understand that for the life of me. Those children, my God. But there are human beings like that. And all we can know about those human beings is if they were happy, there's no way they would do that. They couldn't, because they would feel connected to everyone. Happiness makes us feel connected. They have to be very unhappy, hungry, not fed, empty, unhappy people. So the other person is someone named, well, we'll call her Mary. And she was a housekeeper for one of the people, and she put her own life in jeopardy to help a group of young children that were going to be trafficked and abused horribly. She put her own life on the line, and she ended up with a phone call to me and beaten, and it was not a happy end. And she still said to me, I would do it again. I would do it again. They're okay? Yes, they're okay. I would do it again, even if they weren't. And there's something about her soul, even though that is more dramatic than my little everyday stuff. There's something about her conviction of what fed her to make her feel alive that has become a part of my bloodstream. So she has stayed with me. In fact, we communicated after many, many years just recently in terms of the Kenya land. And then there's Danny that I already told you about. There is Chimirak. Chimirak was, she's still my daughter. She'll always be my daughter, just like Kevin and Casas will. Chimirak, her face, the moment I saw her, the moment I saw Kevin, certain faces, Casas, I fell in love. I fell in love. And there wasn't anything special about the face. It was just, you could tell they feel connected and are wanting sincerely to somehow help the children that they are a child of, and to work so hard to help others has huge impact on me. Chimrak, she had to take care of her brother and sister. I didn't believe her when her brother died from starvation, so he died. She just is still with us despite all my faults. And that's another answer to your question. There's so many people some of the chiefs, some of them were very corrupt, but some of them were just wonderful. I have not done anything ever, I couldn't, that I have done that has saved a child. It hasn't been that. It's gathering together and saying together that this just isn't right. Any way you turn it, upside down, inside out, having children trafficked for sex, having children starving, where we have grocery stores full of food and food thrown out, I have to, at least in some small, tiny way, be trying to do something in my limited time. It just is too insane. Maybe I can just teach a few children. Maybe I can just babysit and give them love to a few children. I have to do some small little something, or it's going to drive me nuts, for my own happiness, for my sake, not out of any giving, not out of any selflessness. I selfishly need to do something, some small little something, or it'll drive me nuts. Plus, I know my happiness comes from when I feel connected and alive to life. And if I don't do something, I'm going to have to turn off a part of myself, and I don't want to. So let me try to teach a few classes. It is people donating an hour a week teaching this class, or Ruth Neese going, and here she's a realtor and very busy, but she's going and teaching each week the young girls so that they don't have to deal with the FGM and how to fight that with their tribe and yet not end up kicked out by their tribe, and how they can stand up against the pressures for prostitution, etc. Teaching middle-class females and all classes together so that they feel equal, absolutely equal, with having intelligence for what they've experienced and strong as women. Ruth Neese, I can go on and on. Titim, oh my goodness, Titim from Indonesia, all the way to shocking, so different East Central Pequot culture. Tish Tesh coming and doing the famine feeds in Pequot, and then finally saying, I can't see another dead child, Carol, I can't do this again. But coming until the point she couldn't. And here she had never experienced any, she came from wealth. Her brother's a famous John Tesh TV show thing in the US. She just kept going until she couldn't anymore. The teachers in the community, out in Pequot, the teachers who, they used to be drunk by noon. And yet those teachers would come and still volunteer and say, I have to, because my family is so angry that they all got together to pay for my education, and now the government has sent me clear out here where I get hardly any salary, and I feel like a failure, and I feel like I've just disappointed everyone. And I was thinking they're the worst human beings to be drunk teachers. And when you talk to them, oh my gosh, they've done this and that for this child. When they're having pressure from their own family to send money, they're still also doing for child, and they're eating so little. and getting drunk because they're so discouraged. There are so many individuals, especially my children, individuals who, what Nelson has done as a doctor, as a surgeon, doing that clinic out there, I can't tell you how proud I am of them. But I'm also equally proud, whatever their career is. I don't care. It doesn't matter if they're a doctor or a gardener I don't care. What I'm so proud of is that they have that connection to other people and that aliveness that makes them want to pass it on somehow. And they're doing that.
Amazing. Thank you so much, Ma. It's always a joy to have you on this podcast. You've taught me something today, which is patience helps us handle tough situations and make thoughtful choices, while intelligence allows us to learn, adapt, and find solution. Would certainly make another part because I'm sure that you have a lot to say and we have a lot to listen to, and everyone just should want to listen to this because it's really deep with so many stories and things to learn from. We've had such an insightful journey and we've explored a lot today. We're really grateful for your time, Ma. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you. I'm so grateful for yours, darling.
Wow, what an insightful journey we've explored today. The story of the IHF Kenyan Center is truly remarkable, and learning about its transformation has been nothing short inspiring.
Yes, hearing about the challenges and success that has shaped the Kenyan Center really highlights the power of education and community support. It was an honor to discuss such a pivotal role and part of the IHF story.
Hearing about the positive impact that the center is making on people's lives reminds me why our work is so essential. The inspiring stories of hope and transformation bring to light the true meaning of our journey. We are not just building a center, but building a better world.
Couldn't agree more, guys. And just a quick reminder for our listeners, if you missed last week's episode about the history of our Thailand center, it's definitely one you won't want to miss. So head over to our podcast channel and catch up on all the stories we've shared.
Yes, there's so much to learn from that episode, and together with today's conversation, you will really get a sense of the global impact IHF is making.
Absolutely, Queen Esther. And as always, if you enjoyed today's episode, make sure to subscribe to our podcast channels, share it with your friends, family, and leave us a review. Your feedback helps us to keep bringing you these important stories.
And don't forget to follow us on all social media so you stay in the loop with upcoming episodes and updates.
Thank you once again for joining us today, and a big thank you to our incredible listeners for tuning in to Talk with the CEO. We'll be back soon with even more stories that inspire. Until then, I'm Darius.
I'm Kunesta.
I'm Aniekeme.
And I am Abraham.
And this has been Talk with the CEO. See you next time.
Choice around in every